Hi kids, Playful Squirrel here with a double episode of The Language of Chess. Today we're going to learn two very, very important words for chess players. You're going to hear these words all your life. They are tactics and strategies. Tactics and strategies have a couple things in common. They are ways to improve your position. So when you say that you're going to use a tactic or you say that you're going to use a strategy, in both cases it's something that you're going to do to try and improve your position. That's sort of the goal of the tactic or the strategy. They also both involve thinking. So in a tactic or a strategy, they're both something where you're sort of looking at the position, trying to figure out a way to improve your position, and then executing that. But tactics and strategies are also quite different. So let me show you the differences between them. In a tactic, it is forcing. Now what that means is that there are threats involved. For example, you do something and you can predict that your opponent has to respond in a certain way in order not to lose anything. For example, if you threaten their king, a check, that's a forcing move because they are obliged to get out of check. They can't just leave their king where it's being attacked. They have to save him. So that would be one example of a forcing move. Another example would be capturing something. If your opponent's piece is attacked by a piece of yours and defended by a piece of theirs, and you take it, that's usually a forcing move because usually they have to take it back. Second thing about tactics is they're usually short and immediate. It's something which you do right now, and the result comes out in just a couple moves. It's not something that you can wait around and do maybe 10 moves later. You have to do it now. It's an opportunity. And finally, to figure out tactics, what your brain has to do, the kind of thinking you do, is something called calculating. Okay, so it's basically saying if I go here and he goes there and I go here and he goes there, what's the result of that? And you calculate a few moves to know if the tactic is good for you or good for your opponent. So a tactic is kind of this like immediate lightning bolt of energy. Bzzzt. Alright, on the other hand, a strategy is kind of the opposite. So a strategy is not forced. It's an idea of something you want to do, but your opponent might actually have a way out of it. It's still something that you're trying to do. It doesn't have to succeed or fail right away because a strategy is not short. It is long term. It is a plan. It is something that you want to do, that you're trying to do, but your opponent can also try to prevent it. And when you come up with a strategy, it's usually not about calculating, but about judging. You try and figure out, for example, where is my opponent weak? Where am I strong? Which piece of theirs is good? Which piece of mine is good? Who has more pieces near my king? Who has more pieces near his king? And you use those factors to figure out what you want to do. So for example, strategies look kind of like this. Each of those arrows is a planned movement, and you see that the blue strategist is planning 20 different prongs of their attack, and then they also see these possible red movements of their opponent. So that's kind of strategy, is sort of looking ahead, having a plan of all these things you want to do, but also knowing that not all of it might actually happen just as you like. Now we move on to an example. So I'm going to show you in this position here one tactic and one strategy. Alright, so the tactic is an opportunity which you have right now to strike black with lightning. And if you don't do it now, it will go away. So let me show you what I mean. In this position, white trades their rook for a bishop. It's a sacrifice because the rook is worth more than the bishop. But after black takes the rook back, white is able to play this pawn here and attack two black pieces. So whichever piece black chooses to save, for example, he'll save the rook, which is worth more, white will then take the knight, and that was a good deal for white because they got a bishop and a knight for their rook. Okay, so that was a tactic, and notice what I mean by its forcing. After white plays rook takes bishop, how many good options does black have? White can be pretty certain that black is going to take back, and then white will play b5 and win something. Now, let me explain why it's an immediate thing and something which you have to seize the opportunity right away. Let's say after playing this move, you didn't play b5. You just played a move like king up to g2. Would you be able to play b5 next turn and win one of your opponent's pieces? Probably not. Probably that opportunity will go away because black will see that possibility coming and move their rook somewhere else. So now if you play b5, well, it doesn't win. Right? It doesn't make that threat. The knight just moves away. Failure. Okay? And similarly, from the starting position, if you don't play rook takes bishop on your very first move, if you instead play king to g2, your opponent has time to try and avoid this tactic of yours, right? They could try and trade your pawn, they could move the knight away somewhere, they could retreat the bishop like this, and your tactic goes away. So that's why it's immediate. You have to do it or you've lost your chance. Now from the starting position, let's say white doesn't have that tactic. If you see that tactic, you should definitely do it to win right away. But what would be a strategy here for white? Well, a strategy here for white would be to say, hey, I've got this pawn giving me a lot of space on the king side. This black king has a few pawns in front of him, but not many pieces defending him. Pretty much just this bishop. So I have two nice bishops aimed in this direction, and a lot of space because of my pawn. So a plan could be I'm going to move lots of pieces towards the king side and slowly try and take over the king. And a plan could look like h4, king g2, rook h1, bishop g5, then a bishop trade. Your knight comes to g5, and then you bring out your queen. So see how that's a bunch of arrows like the map that we saw before? Over here? So now, you don't know for sure that you're going to be able to play all those moves in that order, right? But it might look like this. You play king g2. Black plays bishop b7. You trade rooks over here. You trade one pawn so black can't win your pawn. And then you go ahead with your plan. You play h4. Black brings their queen out here. You put your rook on h1. Black starts to move his knight out. Now you play knight to g5, attacking this pawn here. Black plays h6. Now you bring your queen out. If they take your knight, you have checkmate. So you see, what you're doing is you're creating a whole attacking plan based on the idea that you had more space on the king side. And that is a strategy. Alright, now let's review real quick. What are tactics and strategies? Do you remember? They're ways to improve your position that involve thinking ahead and planning something, right? So, ways to improve your position, and they involve thinking. And what makes something a tactic and something else a strategy? Well, for one thing, how fast it is. And for another thing, how forcing it is. The tactic is going to be forcing. In other words, it's precisely you do one thing, they have only one or two responses, right? It happens quickly and immediately, and you calculate it. Whereas a strategy is not necessarily forced, is not short, it's like a plan over several moves, and you can't figure it out just by calculating it because it's too far ahead. You just sort of think about where you'd like your pieces to go, you make judgments, and that's how you do a strategy. Alright, hope you enjoyed learning these two crucial words of the chess dictionary, and I'll see you for the next one. This is Playful Squirrel, signing out.